Welcome, everyone, to a very, very special edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We have reached the conclusion of the Kansas deep dive. It's been a lot of fun going through this. And if you're a huge Kansas fan, I don't need to tell you that we're ending on a bang. I've actually got Kansas keyboard player Tom Brislin helping me talk about the absence of presence from 2020. Hello, Tom.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for doing this. I mean, this is so cool. Never thought I'd have a member of the band on here talking. And I've said this many, many times. I mean, this is probably my favorite album that's come out in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I've listened to it a ton, and no and no small part of that is you. I mean, your contributions are all over this album.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you dig it.
Um, yeah, so let's just go track by track and just get your thoughts on each of the songs. I mean, the very first song, the title song, the very first thing we hear is you. You hear that echoed piano part, and we're off to the races. And then David's violin comes in, and so it says here you wrote the lyrics to this with Phil Ehart, and Zach did the music. Um, Actually, what came first in the writing process for this album? Because I know this came out. I don't know if did the album was the album in the works before COVID hit, or what happened there? I know it came out during that time, but the preparation for it.
In some ways, the album was even in the works before I got involved
Okay.
because Zach had been writing some music before I joined the band, and he was developing a few of the songs. And Zach made these really detailed demos where it almost sounded like you could listen to them like a full album, but they were just his works in his studio. But they didn't have any lyrics. They had melodies, but there weren't any lyrics in the songs yet for those. For and when I joined the band, I was welcome in as a writing member of the group too, and I figured what would be a better way to jump in than to write lyrics for some of the songs that have already gotten the green light that
Yeah.
are going to be part of the album. So with Phil, he would give me a title. He's really good at coming up with titles of things. And then he would, like for instance, the absence of presence that came from Phil. And he said a little bit about what it meant to him, but I wasn't required to or even encouraged to write necessarily about exactly what he had in mind. He let me just kind of take it from there. So the absence of presence was one of them, as was throwing mountains, animals on the roof, um, and several others that Zach wrote. So I just started writing lyrics, and it's funny you mentioned the piano was the first thing you hear in the album because we work in a non-linear way. We might have been working on another song first, but when it all comes together and you put the songs in order, there it is. And so I didn't
Yeah.
even realize at the time that it would be I'd be making the first sound of the record.
Yeah. 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 That's really cool. And one thing that's great about Kansas is that throughout their career, it's never been a case of a new band member comes in and it's like you stand over there and play this part. I mean, when John Elephant came into the band, he was writing all kinds of things. When Steve Morse came into the band, he was contributing. So yeah, they want everybody to play a part in it, and there's just such a haunting melody that comes in with that piano, and then when the violin comes in, and it's really great that Phil, has that gives you that autonomy to say, look, this is the title. You don't have to think what I think about it. But in the end, like, did he say, that's kind of what I had in mind, or how did that
Yeah,
go?
because I think, well, ultimately he has to put his stamp of approval on it as well. So fortunately for me, we were in sync with this uh, throughout the process of the album. Pretty much every time I brought him some lyrics, he was vibing with it and we were moving forward with it. So I was on the right track.
Yeah. And I mean, writing lyrics for Kansas songs, that has got to be, I mean, you're following in Kerry Livgren and Steve Walsh and these great writers they've had over the years. But these lyrics, I mean, to me, when I'm hearing them, they just, the whole thing just sounds like Kansas to me. And the lyrics are part of that. I mean, fans pick up on everything, and you hear these references. And my understanding is that it's about electronics and how we've always got a device in our faces, and we could be sitting having a conversation with someone and not really paying attention to them. I've certainly been guilty of that.
Well, that's something that I've said in interviews before about that's sort of one of the interpretations, but I never want to force the listener to think what I think about it. That's the beauty of making things a little ambiguous, because there might be another interpretation altogether that works. And another listener may have said, "Oh, I thought this was about this, not that," and they're right too. And that's the beauty of art and music, is that you can take what's given and sort of synthesize the rest in your mind. So it's kind of blown up in my face when I've explained everything about the song.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to let, because I don't want to take anything away from the listener, really. I can talk about what inspired it, and like you said, what you just described was definitely the impetus for the song's creation.
What's really great about it too, though, is that it's not locked to any particular time. Um, you know, I I've talked to different people, and they've said, "Have you ever noticed around the turn of the '80s, a lot of people were writing songs about technology and changing things there. Sometimes those things don't age well, like when people started writing about the internet when it was a relatively new thing. These lyrics, you could listen to them in 50 years time, and they're poetic, they sing well, they phrase well, and you don't necessarily, oh well, this must have been written at such and such a time. You might think that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So next up, if memory serves, I think this was the first song that we got to hear as fans, Throwing Mountains. I think that might have been the first track, but I could be wrong about that. But this is another one that you and Phil are credited on lyrics, and Zach with the music. What do you remember about coming up with great track, Throwing Mountains?
That was the first of Zach's songs for this album that I heard. And so it set the tone for what we thought the album was going to feel like. And again, Phil throwing mountains, he came to me with that phrase. He thought it would be interesting, and didn't say much else about it. It could be, and again, it could be a few different things, but I remember writing the lyrics to that while on the road. So, in fact, all of my writing for this album happened concurrently with my first tour with the band. And so I had all that music from the Point of No Return anniversary tour in my head because I was learning it, I was playing it for the first time. So that was a good pool to be in when I was creating new music, to get with the Kansas aesthetic and the vibe of the band. So I remember being at various places on the road and having little moments of free time, and just getting the pen and paper out and just writing and writing and writing until it was something cool.
Yeah, like Throwing Mountains. Somebody comes at you with that title, and you're like, well, that's interesting. How do you do that? Or it's metaphorical. Is it and without explaining what you think it is about, what was your inspiration for what you decided to do with that phrase,
Well,
that title?
well, what we do say, it's about overcoming obstacles. You think if someone could throw a mountain, they're either a superhero, and everyone has their own battle to fight, and their own challenges to overcome, and it's just about stepping out into the world and going for it, really.
Yeah, and it's very typical Kansas, where it's generally positive, and that's one of the things I like about listening to Kansas. You never, very rarely does Kansas get particularly dark. And even when some of the songs do, there's always a glimmer of hope in there. Um,
Exactly.
so next up, Jets Overhead, another cool title. This one you're solely credited for lyrics. So yeah, Jets Overhead. What are your thoughts on this one?
This was another one of Zach's completed demos that he had approved for their album, and so this one, yeah, I went right from scratch lyrically on that. And again, all the traveling we're doing as a band, because we're not on the tour bus. We do a lot of flying and flying into town. So it was bound to happen that there's something relating to airplanes or the airport would come into play. But I had this idea for a story in my mind and just wrote from there.
And next up is something that, I really love a good instrumental. And you came up with Propulsion One. And when I first heard this, it immediately, not that it's the same feel or anything, but it immediately reminded me of Musicato from Power, which is one of my favorite Kansas albums. So it put me in that space, and I was just bobbing my head. And yeah, I love Phil's double bass drums in it, and it just rocks. And I love how it introduces the melody for Memories Down the Line. It's a very slick thing that's done there. Um, how did you come up with the music to this? Was it, was it a title that Phil gave to you, or did you just come up with the music and think this sounds like Propulsion to me?
Uh, it was all from me. And in fact, it was a song that I had been kicking around in certain forms for years. And it's funny you mentioned Musicato because that was on the set list when I first joined the band. And I think, I don't know if subconsciously, but I realized, oh, this this thing that I had been working on would fit with this group if I just, brought it up to date and arranged it a bit. And I did kind of think of it as sort of, like cinema from Yes 90125, but like sort of an
Yeah,
introduction
yeah,
and just a bash to kind of get it going. And yeah, like an overture, if you will, because it would give a theme to what was coming up next. And the propulsion one it's that's a name that I came up with. It's supposed to be like the name of a craft, like
yeah.
Friendship 7,
Okay.
Freedom 7, Liberty Bell 7. It's like a spaceship or something, and
Yeah,
it's taken off. And that's why it has the number one in it, because
yeah.
it's
I
the
was going to
first
ask you about
craft.
that, but that totally makes sense. Yeah, like the Voyage of 818.
Sure, sure. And what's more is that you mentioned Phil's drumming on it, and that was his contribution in that I didn't I didn't know he was going to go so hardcore with it. My demos were a little bit simpler just to kind of give everyone enough room to contribute with the way they wanted to play in it. And Phil decided to go full double bass drum beat, which really worked with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the album, you know, for lack of a better word, the album rocks. I mean, I really like the fact that, um, you know, Phil and Rich have been, mainstays in this band for such a long time, and there's no mellowing out here. It's most of these songs are put the pedal down, and just like the title, propulsion. And that's what that song does. It propels. Um, and it perfectly sets up Memories Down the Line. And you're credited with music and lyrics for this. How how awesome was that to walk in? I'm sure it was intimidating, but how awesome is that to walk into a situation where they don't just want you for your keyboard skills? They're like, you've got music in you, you've got songs in you. Let's hear it.
Yeah, they basically said, show us what you have and show us what you got. And
Yeah,
um, so I got inspired. And again, the the music for Memories Down the Line was sort of started to develop even before I joined the band, but it really started to take shape, while we were writing for the Absence Presence album.
yeah. It's one of my favorites. So next up, they give you a break on the next one. Another one of my favorite rockers on the album, Circus of Illusion. Again, I mean, Zach, you know, Zach has kind of assumed that Kerry Livgren role of just being the guy that brings in the music. It seems like he's just got so many credits on these songs, and they're great. But you get lyrics from Ronnie on this one, and I have to say that I loved the Prelude Implicit. Thought that was great. I was So glad the band was back after such a long absence from the studio. But on this album, Ronnie is doing an even better job, and he just sounds like the singer from Kansas. He doesn't sound like he's replacing anybody. Um, and the lyrics are great on this song. These are very, again, there's a spirit here with your lyrics and the music. It just feels like Kansas. But when when you think of Circus of Illusion, what comes to mind?
It's funny, I was about to say straight ahead, but in Kansas world, that means something totally different because the
Right.
band is so flavorful and progressive that even a song that might seem a little bit more conventional has a lot of twists, and
Yeah.
Circus of Illusion is no different.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Um, and the titles are so unique. Animals on the Roof. Now, I was talking with a friend of mine, Todd Evans, and Todd's one of the contributors to the to Let It Be Your Guide, Kansas Album Review. Shameless plug for my book. But Todd had an idea of where he thought that title came from, and it's whenever there's a flood, animals will naturally go to higher ground. And so if the water subsides, you've got animals on the roof and they can't go anywhere. Does that have anything to do with what this song is about?
Well, if that's the picture that he or anyone else painted in their mind, they're not wrong. But for me, Phil gave me that title, and he basically meant it to describe people who sort of stand out in a crowd. He was saying when him and Phil, when Phil and Richard were in high school, they had a band together, and they were a little bit different than everybody, these rock and roll people, and they stood out like animals on the roof.
Well,
And so,
that's okay. That makes sense because yeah, the lyric goes, "We still stand out." That makes a
yeah,
lot of
and
sense.
so, I kind of wrote to that spirit of going to the beat of your own drummer, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I love the fact that there's always been that sort of element to Kansas, even like you said, even if it sounds like they're doing something straightforward. Um, and it's like, and they've always sort of shared that with the fans. Like Freaks of Nature is an album I love that not enough people talk about, but they dedicate this album, to everybody that is just a little bit different, is just refuses to, go with the norm. This album is for you, type of thing. So I kind of get that same vibe. And then gorgeous ballad, um, Never, with Zach's music and Ronnie and Phil on the lyrics. Um, you know, I've said this many times about many newer albums in a world where radio formats, weren't quite so fragmented and there was room for everything. This could have been a hit.
Sure. And it's funny because we don't write or record with these sort of commercial pressures anymore. We know what we're doing and what we want to do and just have fun and be creative. And we're also fortunate as a band that our audience does welcome new work and new music. So there's no A&R person saying, you got to cut that down. You got to cut this down. But part of what makes Kansas Kansas is the hooks,
Yeah,
and
hooks and
there
melodies
is
and
accessibility too.
yeah, and it just sounds like something like this would I could hear this being on the radio and not in a not in an earworm sort of thing that you can't get out of your head, but that you want to hear. Yeah, and it's great. It's a fantastic and um, there aren't they don't write songs like that. It's like Greg Can. They don't write them like that anymore. Like that's a great ballad at a time that not a lot of new albums have. Really meaningful ballads, but this one is a good one. And then finally, so as the new guy in the band at the time, not only do they give you free reign on writing a lot of the lyrics, um, they even hand you the mic for the song the river sang. And by the way, good job on the vocal.
Thank you.
What's this song threw me for a loop because I'm got the CD, was excited to get it. I rip it onto my computer. I don't do digital. I always have to get the physical copy. I rip it onto my computer and I'm working away and I'm listening. And then I hear this voice that's clearly not Ronnie Platt. So then I stop what I'm doing and read the credits, and it's you. So At what point did they say to you, "Why don't you sing this one?"
When they heard the demo of the song, when I wrote it and submitted it, they decided, like, they thought immediately that I should sing it on the album, which I didn't expect. I was singing on all my demos that I would like. Memories Down the Line was me singing on the version that I showed to the band and showed to Phil and Richard initially. And I just assumed that Ronnie would sing them, but especially since Memories Down the Line came first, and it was like, yeah, let's hear what Ronnie does with this song. And for by the time the song The River Sang was there, we were getting enough material for the album. It was one of the later ones I sent, and it's not unprecedented that Kansas would have a different singer on a song or two. Robbie Steinhardt
Yeah, yeah.
would do
Billy
it,
Greer.
and it
Yeah.
was not unheard of in the world of Kansas to have a song or two with a different vocal flavor. And so they, from the get-go, they're like, we want you to sing this one on the album. So I went with it.
When you wrote the song, was the coda at the end always going to be part of it, or did that come along later? Because that's a really great part.
It was all complete by the time I submitted it. I like doing these codas in tunes. If you hear some of my other works, I I don't do the same thing, but it's not unheard of for me to do sort of a a refrain or a jam or something at the end to take it to another place.
And I love the sudden stop. I love how it just comes to a crescendo and then that's it. And you're sitting there thinking, I think I'm going to listen to this again.
It
um,
never it because the song technically hasn't ended yet. There is
yeah,
no end. Yeah, the song's
yeah,
still going somewhere.
somewhere, yeah, somewhere that song is still fading out.
So
Yeah,
just jump right back in and start from the beginning.
yeah. It's a great album, and I've listened to it so much that it's very rare for a modern album that I've for me to have listened to so many times that it's in here, and that's usually something that happens with albums I've been listening to for 30 plus years because they just become part of you. So for a relatively new album to do that is a rare thing. Um, and of course, you already mentioned being the Point of No Return tour. You're also on this fantastic double live package here, and what I love about modern day Kansas, let's say Prelude Implicit on, is that the band doesn't seem to shy away from anything in the catalog. I remember when I first got this and saw that you're opening with Cold Gray Morning, and I'm like, oh man, that is so good. Like they're shining a light on Freaks of Nature, which is an album that I just love, and Two Cents Worth and People of the South Wind and Musicato going into Taking in the View. I mean, that was just fantastic. Are there any songs, Tom, that you haven't done live with Kansas that would be, on your wish list? Boy, I'd really like to dig into this, be it, a recent song or a classic song. Is anything that, from the catalog, like, I'd like to try this one live?
I'd sure love to play all the songs from The Absence of Presence live. We've
Yeah.
we've done a few of them. We've done obviously we still do Throwing Mountains. We've played Memories Down the Line, and we've played the song The River Sang live a few times on the latter half of the Point of Return tour. But some of those songs I would just love to hear what they were like in the real world with all of us just playing in a big venue, and that would be my first wish.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, of course. And these songs, they would fit right in with the classic songs. I mean, Kansas fans, it's not really about the hits. I mean, obviously, Kansas were lucky enough to have a handful of radio staples, but I think people will sit down and they'll be like, okay. And even if somebody comes in, maybe they got a best of and, they're watching the show, I'd like to think that they'd hear something like Throwing Mountains or Jets Overhead or Circus of Illusion and go, I really liked that song. I want to find out more. What album is that from? That's the hope. But yeah, I mean, the whole album it sounds like it's designed to be played live. But I'll be honest, like to hear you say you've done 3 out of the 9 songs from the album, that's more than a lot of new bands do. Like bands will put out a new album and not even touch it. So it doesn't have a
Right.
hope to ever catch on with people. Um, so yeah, and this, I've said this many times, like the current lineup in Kansas, it's like this supercharged version of Kansas, and yet it doesn't seem to matter the musicians that have been through. There's a spirit there, and I don't know how else to say it, but it just, whether it's the chord changes, I think a lot of it is Phil's drumming. He doesn't get enough credit for being one of the great rock drummers, but there's something there that you just hear something and like that chord passage sounds like Kansas to me, or that turnaround sounds like Kansas to me. So yeah, the absence of presence, 2020. Without getting too much into inside baseball, when I look at the calendar, I think, well, okay, Prelude Implicit came out 2016. 4 years later, we had a new album. Well, now we're 4 years from that. Any talk of a new Kansas album in the offing?
Oh, we talk about it all the time. I'm sure we would love to do one. I think the the priority right now is getting the live touring back to where it was pre-pandemic because we made a good comeback starting in 2021. But there have been a lot of hurdles that we've had to climb
Yeah,
since then, with people being missing shows and things like that. And it's very important that we get out there and we play while we can. So I think that that is the lifeblood of the band is the live performance. So that's always going to be our number one thing. But the creativity is always going. I'm always writing. I'm always writing. Whether or not it's appropriate for Kansas, I don't know usually until the song is done. But but yeah, we'd love to continue as a creative entity as well, because it's a lot, it's a lot of fun.
yeah. I remember when after Somewhere Elsewhere came out in 2000, it was a 16-year gap between studio albums, and I just I love the last two albums, but there's still a part of me that said, man, it would have been cool to have like two, maybe three more in between there, just to have more of that music to take in. But yeah, the last two are just fantastic, and it feels like the band is rejuvenated and on a roll. Um, so yeah, so that's it, folks. That's the end of the deep dive, and what better way to do it with a member of the band, Tom Brislin. Tom, aside from your work with Kansas, and I know you've played with a million different bands, yes, and it goes on and on and on. But what is happening now outside of the band? What have you got, you know, working on? You say you're always writing, so is there, what's happening
Yeah,
with
I prior to joining Kansas, I'd been playing as a solo artist, and I still do from time to time. I made an album over a decade ago called Hurry Up and Smell the Roses, and I performed that music over the years often and in any kind of setting from a living room concert to a theater. So I still do some solo work, and I've also collaborated with other musicians in this genre and in the progressive scene, and we'll continue to release other works alongside Kansas as we go. So a lot, in fact, like starting pretty soon. Well, actually, by the time this is airing, maybe some stuff will be out already because I'm going to be releasing more things that have gone unreleased and also new works of my own that I'm able to put out in between the Kansas touring.
Awesome. So where's the best place people can find your music, find you online?
I would say the best place is tombrislin.com, and I spell my name with all I's and no E's. And that will show everything from the tour schedule of Kansas to ways to find and listen to my music on all major platforms. And um, I still, like you, I still like the physical product. I have a release of my album as well as we still do CDs, which I
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah, my joke is with people, and I said I will not buy air. I want to look at the artwork. I want a physical thing to look at while I'm listening. So Tom, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, 10 years of doing this channel now. The whole reason I'm called Tim's Vinyl Confessions is because I'm such a big Kansas fan. My very first episode was on my Kansas vinyl. I've done so many episodes on Kansas. Never thought I'd have a member of the band talking to me on here. So this has been a really cool thing. And thank you for, and thank you for all of this, like this, your contribution to this fantastic album and this great part of, a great legacy of timeless music. Yeah, I don't know what more to say, but thank you very much for doing this, Tom. Best of luck out there on tour. I really, really hope that there are going to be some Eastern Canadian dates eventually, because I've seen Kansas exactly once, way back in 1994 in Maine, where I'm up close to the border. So I would really love it if you guys could make your way up east here a little bit.
That would be awesome.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, Tom. Thank you very much. Thanks, folks, for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Go listen to The Absence of Presence. We'll see you later.